You are listening to the extreme metal podcast Necropolis, which is brought to you by Jason from GoCraft and Shelly from HateMeditations.com and Metal Legion magazine. Welcome to Necropolis. This is Jason, also known as Lone Goat from GoCraft. We do have an interesting episode for you today. We do have one of our prestigious guests returning today. And I've known this guy forever. He's the guy who actually helped out GoCraft early on. He released the first album, and he kind of threw me into the public consciousness in that regard, and started getting a lot of publications writing about GoCraft, a lot of attention, and made me not a household name, but it got my name out in the underground. So we do have Luke, also known as Sleepwalker, also known as Rother or Water. I think it's like the German pronunciation of father. Is that correct, Luke?
Rother, it's as in fraternity, like brother.
Oh, brother. Okay. Well, we do have brother Luke today, and the main reason we're bringing him aboard today is that in addition to having a plethora of great projects, he had a Transylvanian Funeral, which is very, very underrated U.S. black metal. He was, also doing a Temple of Abraxas. I think that's still active. And in addition, he ran Forbidden Records, Forbidden Magazine, Forbidden Radio. He was a real estate agent for a while. He is a novelist. He wrote about dwarves, and it's called Hammerheart. If you ever want to check that out on Amazon, it's a fantasy novel about, like the Conan version of dwarves or something. I have no idea about overcoming obstacles, one could say. I haven't read it yet, but jack of all trades, a master of quite a few. So thank you for coming on, Luke.
Hey, thanks for having me. It's so I was trying to think about what I've done in the last year since we last talked, but now that you read all that off, I guess it's been enough to have me back. So thanks for having me.
Yes, sir. Always a great pleasure, and always been a great person to be in contact with. I guess since like 2012, a whole 10 years, a whole decade now, we've been chatting with each other and scheming behind the scenes. So it's always great to have you in my League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. So we do have Shelly. Shelly is coming back. He's the co-host still, and just a PSA, we did move the podcast over to Hate Meditations. So it's on the Hate Meditations YouTube channel, as well as he posts the episodes, the Spotify links up on HateMeditations.com. And he is also one of the writers for Metal Legion magazine. So thank you for coming on, Shelly.
Thank you very much. I don't know about League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, I'm definitely jack of some trades, master of slime. But yeah, great to be here.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So Luke, you recently did a soundtrack for another video game. Is that correct?
I'm still in the process of it. The game is in early access. I think it just went into early access last week. It's called Project Warlock II. It's the sequel to the game that I was involved in. It got released in 2018, I believe. So this is a sequel. And a third of it is done and available right now, and it's a lot of fun. It lets me work in a new way.
Cool. Yeah, I noticed part of the soundtrack is already up on YouTube. I was checking that out earlier this morning, and it's pretty cool. Like, I can see how the music translates to like level design or main menu, title screens and things like that, where you're just kind of painting like an atmosphere of the game. It's very metalized too, so there's like a lot of metal riffs and texture in there, but it's really like you can definitely see like someone jumping into a level and just being immersed with the aesthetics of the video game, and then the soundtrack going along with that, painting that distinctive atmosphere. How was your approach to writing a video game soundtrack? Is that different than when you write like music for your black metal projects?
There's some similarities and there's some differences. The biggest difference, I think, is that in a video game, the music is typically, or the sound design, because it's not necessarily music, is how I think, is that it's non-linear basically. So you'll have a loop. You might have like a chord progression or a loop or a rhythmic pattern happening, and the music will change if you walk into a different area, certain things in the environment that you experience will trigger audio cues. So you might have just ambient strings happening, and then there's, if you find, say, a treasure chest or whatever it is, some drums happen or a bell rings or something like that. And that's where, because I'm lacking in software development with Unity and Fmod, that's something that I practice when I can. I have to approach the song that I'm writing as being able to loop on its own and have variation in the dynamics from quiet to soft and tension and release. I try to build in those things to an actual song so that when someone takes the CD, I'm assuming they're going to release CDs and downloadable copies of the soundtrack in addition to the game. They did it on the first one. That when someone puts the CD in or they put it on as background music, it actually works as its own standalone musical release. And it's not like, well, that doesn't really work. It's just kind of like this ambient bunch of nonsense. So, I mean, there's some similarities. I'm doing heavy metal and death metal, black metal sounding stuff on the game for when the fighting is really intense. It's a first person shooter, so it's bloody and graphic and you're ripping up demons and stuff. But I'm also trying to work with ambience and tension filled atmospheres and uncomfortable sounds and things like that, other than just black, blast beats and the typical ambience that you'd find in death metal. I'm looking for something else. A lot of it's synthesizer based, so it's kind of a rambling answer, but I think it sums up how I approach it.
Yeah.
How much creative freedom do you get with this? Do the game creators sort of come to you and say they want a particular vibe or like what the concept is, and you just run with it, or are you given like total freedom to just do as you please based on what the game is?
I'm given a lot of leeway. They don't really tell me I need you to change this, that, or the other. Once in a while they will, but what typically happens is, like, they contracted me to do X amount of songs and the game's only a third of the way done, and I've already met that quota. So I just write music, I give it to them. If they want to use it, great. If they don't, it's usually pretty black and white. Like, we totally like this and want to use it, or this isn't really fitting what we want. I'm not sure what you found on YouTube. When the demo came out, I think someone like took apart the files of the game itself, the software, and uploaded some tracks. And I think they were all my tracks, oddly enough, because I am working with someone I know named Jerry Lear. I'm working with him on the soundtrack, and we have different approaches. We use different software. We have different sounds. But I try to make it as fucking weird as possible, to be honest. I try to kind of stretch what I do because I've worked with death metal for so long. I'm not going to say it's boring, but it allows me to do things that I normally wouldn't do, and that I normally wouldn't release under a black metal banner for Forbidden Records. It might be a little bit more pop or a little bit more power rock or a little bit more whatever, but they give me feedback, but typically only if they really don't like it. So I just, by that point, I've got something else ready to go. So
It's interesting. Like, I've actually listened quite a bit, just kind of like background textures of like the Doom soundtrack, and that I had mentioned in chat. I don't know if you responded yet. If you had either know or know of Andrew Hulsholt. He actually does some pretty cool textures and atmosphere. He did Quake Champions, Doom Eternal, as well as Dusk, which Dusk is another one of those boomer shooters. So Project Warlock is definitely a boomer shooter and very pixelated. It's very artistic with how they pixelated. It's kind of like, old school Quake, a little bit in that regard. Are you familiar with his work? Like, do you listen to what other composers do in the boomer shooters, or do you approach it all in your own headspace without considering like what other people are doing? You just want your own original voice.
I've seen the name Andrew Hulsholt on Twitter, and I think it's bounced around here and there, but I don't really keep up with any of it. I don't seek out new music like I used to. I think running Forbidden Magazine and having, 15 emails a day from PR companies and record labels really burned me out on that. I realized how much music is out there, and the time I could spend critically listening to and critiquing other people's music is time I could just be making my own. So, I figure there's always stuff for me to learn. I'm not approaching that. My attitude is not one of, I have nothing left to learn or any bullshit like that, because I definitely lean heavily on my studio, but I'm a studio rat, and if I had to perform anything live, people would probably fucking leave the club. But at the end of the day, I really don't seek out other people's work. I don't get a lot of time to play video games. I'm not very good at first person shooters like I used to be when I was 12 or 14 or whenever Doom came out. If I had a chance to play a first person shooter, I'd probably play Doom or Wolfenstein or Quake, something older. Project Warlock 2, the sequel, the artwork is absolutely fantastic. It's a huge improvement over the first game. I think visually and musically. And I think that the artwork is so good and the game is so fast and dynamic in that sense that I think it's going to outshine some of the music, which I'm cool with, because everybody loves their accelerated graphics cards and the super fast carnage of shooting and running and gunning. So short answer, no, I don't. I just kind of do what I do, and if it works, cool. If it doesn't, cool.
No. I see. Yeah, definitely. I mean, I completely understand about when you ran the magazine, because I actually wrote for you for a little bit there, and I just remember it's hard to keep up with things, and staying on top of new releases, and writing about that, which I've done for a few publications now. It's tiring. So I literally just write about whatever the hell I want to write about, and I'll find a website to publish it nowadays. But when it comes to just getting into you mentioned Doom, Quake, like both of those have great soundtracks. The original Quake was Trent Reznor, and like the first track of that soundtrack is amazing, and I actually like it way more than Nine Inch Nails, honestly. Like
Right.
he captured that atmosphere. Also, unsure if you've ever played or heard the soundtrack to Doom 64. Very unsettling stuff. I remember having a Nintendo 64 when I was a kid, playing that game, and that game is creepy as hell, by the way. It was like the most creepiest Doom. Like I felt filthy playing that game, because it was so just the aesthetics is just very evil and very dark. And I remember playing that, like I thought, I just felt bad playing it. Like I needed to go pray to God or something afterwards, even though I didn't believe in God back then, but that's how it made me felt. But anyway, yeah, it's a great soundtrack too, for like the ambient nature of unsettling first person shooters. So Project Warlock, I've seen a lot of press with the first game that came out. There's obviously the big YouTubers and Twitch people who do reviews of video games and all that, and Project Warlock got into the spin, and a lot of people talked about it, and it was even released on Nintendo. So you're on a Nintendo game. I never, like 10 years ago, you talked to me, and I was like, yeah, Luke, he's a great black metal guy, owns a great label. Never expected to be in a Nintendo game.
It's really surreal. Yeah. It's on Nintendo, and then it got released for PlayStation, PS4, and then Xbox, and it's available digitally too. But there was a publishing company called Limited Run who did physical copies of the 2-disc soundtrack and the game on a Blu-ray disc for PlayStation. And I think it was I bought one, and I've set it on a shelf. I haven't played it because I don't even have my PlayStation hooked up. I just moved to Florida, and it's like if I have a time to play a video game, my video game's in my studio. It's my synthesizers. It's my guitar. So
where are you at in Florida?
I'm in Riverview. I'm the East Bay of Tampa.
East Bay.
I'm right outside Tampa. I'm like 5 minutes from the university.
Oh, cool. I was born in Tampa, So know all about that area. I know a lot of musicians too. Yeah. I had played with Browning and Nocturnus, or After Death, it was called back then. But now he's doing Nocturnus again under Nocturnus AD. Yeah, I know those guys really well and know a lot of other musicians there. Could possibly throw your name around if you want me to, but I know you don't want to play live or anything like that. But perhaps for like a bassist or a drummer, I know people, so just let me know and I'll be happy to if you ever wanted to just jam or whatnot. But also my getting into personal shit on this podcast, I'm sorry, but my cousin, I recently got reconnected with my cousin, and her husband is an ex-Navy SEAL, and he's doing real estate in Florida now. I think I tagged you on one of his posts, but I know you have a real estate license as well, so perhaps both being in Florida doing real estate, that'd be pretty cool. Like, I don't know where you're at with real estate now, but yeah, he seems to be really successful.
Yeah, I'm licensed in Arizona, but I'm not licensed in Florida, and I'm trying to not get another real estate license. I was licensed in Oregon, I was licensed in Arizona, and it's kind of easy money, but it's also just not how I want to spend my time. So
Completely understandable. And I know you're different, you're a great guy and all that, but I've seen some really sketchy real estate agents, like they're just going by old people's houses asking if they're still alive so they can kind of plot out. It's like, well, this person's on their way out, I could probably sell their house. And there's people like that in the real estate industry where as soon as someone dies, they jump on their houses, try to sell it as fast as possible. And I really don't like that type of mentality. It's kind of like like the lawyers who like chase ambulances, like when someone gets in a car accident so they can sue like a company or whatnot. And,
yeah, well, the thing that and you don't see a lot of licensed agents do this because it's so greasy, but you'll have an investor go to somebody's house and they'll say, oh, well, the houses in your zip code are only selling for $100,000, so I'd be happy to give you $125,000. They show up with all these printouts of bullshit they made up. They claim to be a realtor or whatever it is. They might be a realtor, and then they say, well, and I forget what fallacy that is. I don't know if it's the ad hominem or appeal to the man or appeal to authority, I think, where someone says, well, you're a realtor, you're an expert. You're not. You're not an expert in jack shit. You don't have a crystal ball. You have a piece of paper that the state gave you that you paid $600 for, that now people commit the fallacy of appeal to authority. Oh, this guy's the expert, so I'm going to trust his price valuation. They buy the house for $120,000 and they sell it for $300 a week later, and the people never knew. Now, if you do that to enough people, if you cast a wide enough net, you're going to make money. So I didn't really get out of it because it's there's sharks in the tank. I got out of it because there's idiots in the tank. Every transaction has at least one clown that's going to try and wreck the car into the tree that's been sitting there the whole time. So I don't know. That's neither here nor there. So
that's cool. Yeah, I know you're a very big entrepreneur, and that was one of your endeavors at one point in time. Also, like the amount of things that you've done is just amazing. And I know the running the magazine was very time consuming and all that, but it's still a great accomplishment. You did the omnibus for it, correct?
Yeah, the omnibus. I don't even know what the sales have been on that thing. If I made it available to people, but it's on, I think, lulu.com. You can buy it in hardcover with a dust jacket. It's 220 some pages. I did the best of the blog, where I took a bunch of blog interviews, the best of the website, and put those on the page. And then I think we had a best 100 albums of all time. And then there was like I think the Lost Marduk interview that I did right before I started the magazine. This huge interview with Morgan. And yeah, it was fun, and it's available. You can buy it in softcover and hardcover, and it's a really nice book.
Cool. Definitely check that out. Give me a link after we're done. I'll post it in the description, or Shelly will. And yeah, so you had ran a magazine. I can definitely tell why you get burnt out of doing all that content. But what I found, like working with you as a record label owner, with I had my project GoCraft, and you really put me into the public consciousness running, you're releasing All for Naught. I think it was like 1,000 copies that you did, and just the sheer professionalism. It spread like wildfire. Like you got me all over the place. You did a lot of hard work. And I think like it was like 9 out of 10 reviews were actually really positive, which says a lot. Like usually, you know, you're just going to be naysayers in whatever you do, but just we got a lot of great feedback and a lot of promotional materials from those reviews and interviews. Like you got me hooked up a shit ton of interviews. Just the sheer professionalism that working with you is just amazing. And Void Hanger's also been good in that regard. Like, you know, they try to be, well, at one point in time they were really great with the PR. And got me in a lot of publications as well, mainly in Europe. But you're the first one who actually got my project a lot of success. So number one, I want to thank you, and number two, I just want to share my respect towards you for running a tip top record label. Even though it was really underground stuff, you knocked it out of the park. Like just the hard work, you rolled up your sleeves and you got things done.
Well, I appreciate it. Thanks. I mean, the idea of doing something to me is if you're not going to do it correctly and if you're not going to do it to where it's successful, however you want to define success, if you're going to half-ass it and suck at it, then don't do it. Do something you're good at. And apparently I'm good at following through and just, making it work out. Apparently it's not really a skill I thought I had until I was in the thick of doing it. For me, it's paying it forward. If I've been successful at anything, I try and share it with somebody else because, that's the only real way to I don't know, go around in life.
So in San Antonio, there used to be a record shop called Black Death Covenant Records. And we might have talked about this on the first episode that we did a year ago. But it just kind of, it's not in my memory anymore. So I want to talk about it again if we did speak about it. But when it was this little record shop here, it was ran by Alex from Thornspawn. And he had this, massive black metal collection. It's kind of like a cult shop up in Helsinki, Finland, where you walk in. It's a little small store, but there's primarily just black metal and shelves and shelves of black metal and merchandise and things of that nature. But after hours at Black Death Covenant Records, Alex would lock the doors, and there was a wing bar right next door. So sometimes we would go get wings and have some beers there. And most of the time we just drank in the record shop after hours and just blasted metal and invite people, our friends over, and just kind of chit chat. And it got pretty wild sometimes. But one thing that came up and how I discovered you before you even reached out to me was Brian Kelly from Oak Moon. He's now he's in the Navy as a recruit division commander, which is like a drill sergeant in boot camp for the Navy, which is crazy. I can definitely see that guy being really ruthless and giving a lot of trainees hard times. But he brought in A Transylvanian Funeral, The Outsider, and he put it on in that record shop after hours while we're having some beers, and it floored all of us. And Alex, he plays drums from Thornspawn. And he even said, it's like, I want to play drums for this band. And I think he reached out to you at one point. But that's how we discovered your music. And, even going back way back then to 2012, I believe, 2011, you're really held in high regard, in my opinion, just really enjoying The Outsider, especially for USBM, because USBM it doesn't have the best reputation around. And you create really good black metal for being in the US. But even back then, would you ever consider like a Transylvanian Funeral or Temple of Abraxas? I know you worked with Brian Gastelum with that project. Would you consider ever playing live?
Probably not. I mean, I just don't have time. I have a daughter now, and my wife's getting ready to go into grad school, and life is the way it is. My focus is on caring for my child and making sure my wife can focus on her education, and it's just never been a thing that I've really cared about. I used to go to metal shows in Indianapolis. I don't even know if I went to any in Tucson. I went to some in California, and stuff. It was just always, there's 10 bands on the bill, and the only people in the audience are the other bands and their girlfriends and whoever's hanging out, at the bar. And it just was never a big thing to me. I played in a band for a long time, always wanted to have a band when I was a teenager. And when it was right around the time I quit drinking is when I started recording A Transylvanian Funeral. My friend Ed and I, or Sojourner, as he's known on the album, we quit drinking together because we were drinking every day, getting thrown out of bars for fun and just being fucking raging drunks. And we got in trouble, and we're like, let's try and stop. Let's just make music. Let's just stay at home and make fucking music, smoke cigarettes, and record. And that's what we did. And that's what you hear on the self-titled debut. And I just kind of lost my interest in playing live and giving a fuck. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of effort. And the time that I put into having people in a band, having a drummer and a bassist and a guitarist and a van full of equipment and all this, I'm a studio rat, man. I'd rather be at home in front of a keyboard or a guitar amp and some microphones and some software. That's me. I'm reclusive like that. And I get more done. I have released more albums by myself than most bands do, with 5 members and 5 incomes and 5 budgets. You know what I'm saying? So my rate of return is just a lot better. So, and I don't do it to make money. I haven't really made any money. I don't think I've even broke even. I just do it because I have to be creative, and being in a band kind of gets in the way of me being fucking creative. I want to record music. I want to release it, even if it's just a digital release, and then do it again. If you ask me what my inspiration for a song was on an album, I might not even remember what song it is. I'm looking forward. I don't look back, and I don't really worry about being in a band and appeasing an audience or appeasing band members or having that dynamic. It's just not what I do. If other people do it, that's cool. I'm totally good with that. I'm not knocking that, but different strokes for different folks.
Yeah, it's especially in this kind of music, it's a hell of a lot of work for no return, either financial or oftentimes even sort of acclaim, because like you said, you're often playing to a couple of people at the bar and a dog that might have wandered in or something. Yeah. You have to also travel a lot, which takes a hell of a lot of time for a half-hour slot or something like that. And it can be quite demoralizing sometimes when you just sort of think the amount of work it takes for the amount of return you get from it. Yeah.
Well, if people come up to me and they say, hey, I really liked your set, or I really like your album, or whatever, it's cool, but thanks, but it's like, I don't really care. I don't make it for other people. I'm sorry. I appreciate you guys having me on the show, and I know you guys like my music and stuff, but at the end of the day, if you didn't like it, my response would be, you know what? Good. It's not for everybody. I don't want everyone to listen to my shit and be like, oh yeah, that's great. It's not for everybody.
Except when it's a video game, right? Because it's a different mindset with the video game, correct?
What's that?
Except when you're creating video game music, then it is for everybody, right?
Well, not necessarily. I mean, I have to like it first. And if I don't like it, then somebody else might not like it. If I'm okay with it, and the developer really, really loves it, it's like, sure, put it in the game. Again, I try to be indifferent. I try to separate myself and my ego and what I think is, the ultimate song that I'm going to write. I have to detach myself from my creativity at some point, because the way that I like to do it is I like to write, release it, and then just rinse and repeat. I know I listened to Aeon of Apophis the other day. I was like, well, I guess I should listen to some of my music if I'm going to be on a podcast, because I haven't heard it forever. And I listened to Aeon of Apophis, which is probably my favorite album I've done in the last 7 or 8 years. And I was like, man, the mix on this is fucked up. This doesn't sound right. The bass is too loud, or this is filtered too much, and it's just a muddy mess, or it's distorting here. But I work fast, and I just think, if I like it, not everything is going to be not everything is going to be perfected. I don't strive for perfection. I strive for completion and a learning process, always improving and changing what I do. If somebody doesn't like the track for a video game I've done, then they can mute it. When I was a kid, I talk about this, in an interview for the game I did, was what I didn't like listening to all the music when I was playing Doom or Wolfenstein. So I would just mute the music. I'd leave the sound effects going. Then I'd put a CD, on in the computer and listen to, Slayer, Metallica, or whatever. So.
Right. So obviously,
I could buy at Kmart.
Obviously, you're very hard. Like, I think most people, I think it's part of human nature to always look back on things and think about things that they could have improved in the past. Where I just think it's normal, because you might have a conversation with somebody, like for instance, this podcast, and then like when we're done, there might be something that you might have wanted to bring up, or perhaps you shouldn't have said something, the way you did. You could have, said it, way better. But I think it's part of human nature. Like, I think about when I was in the 6th grade at Aberdeen Prep, and I went into the school teacher's desk just to mess with him, and I rearranged everything in his desk. And I remember just getting chewed out afterwards. And I still think about that. Like, I probably shouldn't have done that. And, like in the 5th grade, I put tacks down on the teacher's seat, and, stuff like that. And I'm like, why was I such a horrible asshole kid? And, I think about that constantly. It's like how, that's an extreme example, but when it comes to mundane things of, like common interactions, like mundane interactions with other people, you can kind of think back. Like, I remember I was talking to one professor, and I had mistakenly said that the university didn't offer Latin. They just didn't offer Latin at my location, but they do offer Latin. I think about things like that, and just, I think it's human nature to look back and just criticize yourself and be hard on yourself, where you could have said things, way better, and not so flippantly or whatever. And when it comes to music, especially because music is very personal, we can be very, very hard on ourselves. And I think that's why criticism, when it should come in, it should be constructive and it should be polite. But yeah, there's people that should not be making music that should be told that, so they can perhaps find a different path in life. But when it comes to actual musicians, I think the best path forward for any type of criticism should be constructive. And I also think that musicians tend to be quite sensitive in that regard too. So you have to be careful the phrasing, the criticism, because it could be taken the wrong way, and you might create an enemy that you didn't want to, which I've done in the past quite a few times. Just tell people, is like, well, that could have been better or whatnot, and just didn't phrase it the right way. But I just think it's human nature to always look back on things and think about ways that you can improve it. But you always have to march forward. You can't just dwell in the past. So and what I hear with the Project Warlock 2 soundtrack, the little snippets that I heard that's on YouTube, the production's really good. I don't hear anything wrong with the production at all. And for a video game soundtrack, it sounds like a really good soundtrack. Like, soundtracks are not supposed to be very dominant. It's not supposed to be narrative music, quote unquote, or taking you on a journey. It should be painting an atmosphere where a player can get into, the video game, concentrate on shooting demons and whatnot, and having a backdrop of great aesthetical music that, the atmosphere grants, that experience so much more. So yeah, definitely don't beat yourself up over production values or anything like that, because obviously you create great music, and regardless of production, you have a lot of fans, and Shelly is one of them. Shelly, what's your favorite aspect of Temple of Abraxas and H.R. Sylvanian Funeral?
Well, actually, I was going to follow that up with a question. So yeah, I just wanted to know what the main motivation was for starting sort of Temple of Abraxas after A Transylvanian Funeral was winding down, and was there any kind of key difference in like the the motivation behind it was Temple of Abraxas going for a slightly different angle to a Transylvanian funeral, or was it just a continuation?
I think that I'm big on titles and big on names, and I don't know. If you'd asked me when I'd done it, I probably could have gave you a better answer. But I was using the name Sleepwalker during Transylvanian funeral, and that was, I don't know, it's kind of a whatever name. And then the name Frater Azoth is, I took that name, Brother Azoth, or, if you study alchemy and metaphysical occult stuff, Azoth is a word that comes up once in a while. As I think of it as like a fifth element, the element of change. So earth, air, fire, and water are all their own thing, but if you were to transmute them from one to the other or whatever, that catalyst is Azoth or light, or it's translated from different languages. It's interpreted by different people. So, but I took it to mean change. And, the idea of change is something that I experience a lot in my life. I mean, I've lived in 3 different states in the last year. I'm always changing jobs and career paths. I don't really have any, preconceived notions about what I'm supposed to do with my life, because I like to change it. Maybe I have issues with identity, or maybe I don't, depending on who you're asking. But I changed the name because I just wanted to. People were always calling a Transylvanian funeral. They would write about it and they would call it, what is it? It's Transylvanian Hunger, right? The Dark Throne album.
Yeah,
They'd always fuck it up. And it's like, well, Transylvanian is obviously too big of a word for a lot of people to write and get it correct. So, I didn't necessarily want to be associated with the Dark Throne album. I mean, I like that album and I like all of Dark Throne stuff, but I just kind of felt pigeonholed, and I felt like it was time to change. And that's it. I mean, it's just the element of change. I feel like it's the only true constant that we experience. So rather than resist it and injure myself mentally and spiritually resisting change, I try to embrace it. So I think that's probably one of the better answers I've given for that question.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. Because so discussing your approach again in sort of just writing and recording and then moving on, and sort of keeping it very not informal, but the works just they're kind of, they're standalone pieces. There's not, the need for like a follow-up tour or revisiting it or rehashing it. And it in a sense, you're in good company there in terms of like the history of black metal, because it does invite a lot of solo artists who work essentially from home and put out material, not necessarily with the view to how it's going to be received or not. And that's often when the best black metal is conceived. Like Jason's already discussed the outside of the Transylvanian Funeral album, which is just a really, really well put together piece of black metal. And then Temples Forlorn on the Temple of Abraxas discography is one of the most impressive releases I've come across in the last few years. And it does seem to be that this form of black metal is very sort of obscure and a bit lo-fi, but also very richly atmospheric. It does lend itself to just being steered by one person. There's no consideration as to how it might be like translated into a live setting, or how it needs to sort of work its way through a group of band members that, you might lead to compromise and so on. It just seems to lend itself to just that one mind transmitting music to, an audience that they might never actually meet or even be aware of.
Right. There's very few, in all reality, I mean, think of all the opportunities that Dark Throne would have had to go on tour and whatever.
Yeah, true.
I mean, I'm sure that people have.
They did. I was in Finland about a month ago, and I actually hung out with some people who saw Dark Throne perform in Finland. So it was really cool to hear about that, because here in the U.S. we would never even, imagine like Dark Throne coming and performing, and then in Finland it's like, whoa, yeah. But Go ahead. Sorry.
Well, I think that, I mean, I'm sure that people have offered them opportunities and tour packages and suitcases full of money to at least tour Europe and come to America and do their thing, and they're just not interested in it. When I was doing the magazine, I had an interview set up. Triptychon was set to come to Tucson. They were going from LA to Tucson to Albuquerque. And I talked to the tour manager. They canceled their date in Tucson. I was supposed to go and meet with Tom Warrior and sit down and talk to him and do an interview, and they canceled, and I was bummed out. I wanted to set it up over the phone. And I was like, why'd you cancel? And he's like, well, we sold 10 tickets. We sold 10 tickets pre-sale. So we're just going to skip it and go to Albuquerque. It's not worth stopping. And I thought, man, if Tom fucking Warrior sells 10 tickets, then, you know, why even waste your time trying to go on some sort of tour? And I don't know. I mean, you got to follow your dreams and have tenacity and never give up and shit like that. But it's like I said earlier, I can spend time and energy and money trying to put together a band and rent a practice room and work up a set list and go on tour. And I could put together a pretty nasty set list. I think some of my songs would translate really well to a live setting and just rip it up. But I could do all that. But at the same time, I would rather just be at home in my studio, channeling my higher consciousness and trying to record it, trying to bottle up lightning. You know what I'm saying? That's what I enjoy. I enjoy the creative process. I'm not a consumer of music. I'm a creator of music. I don't have a huge record collection. I do have a record collection. I got about 20 records. Half of them are my wife's. I've got Thin Lizzy. I've got Prince. I've got Pink Floyd. I've got Frank Zappa.
Yeah, they're really obviously key influences for your music. Prince.
Oh yeah. Yeah, you can really hear the Prince influence, I'm sure. Crimson, Frank Zappa. It's like, I don't even know if I have any death metal stuff. You know, it's just like I'm not a consumer of music. I'm not into the capitalist grind. Oh, well, you know, here's this album that's been out for 30 years and we repressed it and there's new liner notes and a bonus track, so buy it again. I'm not into that shit. You know, if I was getting royalties off someone doing that with my shit, I might have a different attitude, but right now I don't. So and I thought, go ahead.
Sorry, go on.
I thought about using the name Transylvanian Funeral again. I was in talks with, is his name Odin from Moribund?
Yes, it is. He's
Yeah,
cool.
yeah.
He's cool. He actually, I don't know how the fuck he got a hold of my music, but he actually invited me to play some show up there.
Right.
But yeah, go ahead.
I was in talks with him and I was trying to liquidate the last of my distro. And he wasn't really into it. He was like, you know, whatever, I would, but I'm not. And then I said, if you gave me a record deal, I'd give you all these CDs I got left. Just do a press for me. And he's like, well, if you're still using the name of Transylvanian Funeral, I would really consider it if you're still active. I was like, well, I'm still active under the name Temple of Abraxas. The only thing that's changed is the logo and the name. I'm still the only guy that's doing it. So
You do it as a package deal. They can take the GoCraft and the A Transylvanian Funeral. We come as a pair, bro.
right, yeah, tag team this shit.
I'm just joking because he did offer me that show, and I am writing a new album. But yeah, we'll see what comes of that.
I would be into it. At the time, I thought, well, it's still the same music. I want people to like my music based on the music and not because it's name recognition. Again, it's appeal to authority. It's appeal to whatever it is. Like, oh, well, that's, you know, I recognize this is a good brand, so I'm going to purchase it. I just want you to listen to the music and see if you like it, buy it based on that. But, you know, that's been a few years. And now if he were to say, hey, I would re-release your old stuff, give it a proper release, you give me a new album in the same vein, I'd probably jump on it because, you know, fuck it. Who cares?
Well, that seems like a really great deal, honestly, because Moribund has probably one of the best reputations for labels within the US. So, especially for black metal. So I would consider that. I mean, it's completely up to you. I do like the name Temple of Abraxas because the Gnostic undertones to that name more than A Transylvanian Funeral. So speaking of Gnosticism, is the name derived from that or just something that you thought was cool?
I'm not really that well read in Gnosticism or anything, but from what I have read, and again, it's always my own interpretation of a word or a language. Same with Azoth or Frater Azoth, but Abraxas to me was um, an all transcending deity that was good and evil, male and female. It was a unity of opposites, and that was just it's an expression of it in a particular culture. If you look in whatever culture or religion, you'll find that same unification of opposites or a duality. But I at the same time I thought it was a cool sound. I think it's a little bit of a mouthful. The next project I do might just be under the name Abraxas, and it might not even have guitars in it. It might just be fucked up synthesizers and crazy ambience, because I've kind of done the blasting black metal thing, and you know the sound of synthesizers and weird ambience kind of lends itself to ideas of enlightenment, ideas of transcendent thought, transcendent consciousness, that everyone's heard a guitar and a 1 6 4 5 chord progression. So that's harder to represent, I think, with or it's better to represent transcendent thought and ideas of unification of opposites with uncommon sounds, I guess. So we'll see. It's kind of a weird name. It's a bit of a mouthful, but it has meaning to me, and what it means to you is correct for you and the next person. I don't try to put too many draw too many lines around what things should or should not be. Things are only as you perceive them, in my opinion.
Yeah, there was a band, I forgot its name. It was actually pretty good, from Italy, and they had so many occult references in the write up for the promo. Like, part of it was like it's Gnostic, the other part of it was Neoplatonism and Christian theology, and like a lot of different threads. But I can actually see like some correlations between Neoplatonism and Gnosticism, namely because the material existence is at the bottom of reality, which the Gnostics would call profane, which a lot of early Christian theology would call profane as well, because there's suffering and death, blah, 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 blah. And, but there's beyond the material plane, beyond what we physically experience, there is a higher realm to both of those. So I can see some correlation there, especially like Temple of Abraxas. Like Abraxas, I believe that's something correlated to the archons, which are the fashioners, like the primordial fashioners of physical reality. It may not be conscious beings and whatnot, but that's what Gnostics kind of believe, and they do kind of believe that they're malignant because obviously physical reality, and I've had people on this podcast refer to reality as being hell. So obviously a lot of people are discontent with their lives and mundane experience, so they opt for transcendental values or what have you, or meta reality, things of the beyond, and focus on that. What are your kind of thoughts in that regard? You're talking about transcendence, which transcendental idealism has a few different branches, stemming from Kant to Schopenhauer to Hegel to even Harvard here in the U.S. There was a transcendentalists which had their own take on that and their own take on ontology as well. What are your kind of thoughts on like Gnosticism and transcendence? Is that part of the concept for Temple of Abraxas, like just wanting to transcend, or is there more of a rigor to that line of inquiry?
It's pretty loose. I haven't read Kant and Hegel and all these people, so I can't really speak with authority on it too much. My idea of Gnosticism is, I guess, faith through experience. Having faith in whatever it is you're referencing, whether it's a deity or higher consciousness or the self, but having faith in that thing without I don't even know how to put it really. I'm sure you'll be able to poke holes in whatever I say, but it's like, with taking a leap of faith to believe in God, to transcend logic and make the leap of faith. To me, there's other ways to have a faith in a higher power without throwing logic out the window. I'm not really sure what it is. It's something that's very personable. I don't think it's something that you can go pick up off a shelf. I don't know if it's something that can be taught, but you're going to internalize whatever stimulus you have in reality with your own tool set, your own consciousness, your own language, and you're going to make your beliefs based on that, and they're going to be just as good as whatever you could buy off the shelf. I think I'm not really sure how to answer your question because I'm not nearly as well read as my library would suggest.
Well, else, you had mentioned transcendence or transcendental aspects of, Abraxas, which is part of Gnosticism, which there is transcendence in Gnosticism. You want to transcend beyond the profanity of reality and to higher forms of existence, quote unquote. Which I probably could have said that a little bit better, but and that was a spouse. Well, it wasn't really a spouse, and Kant was more about. Kant is very grueling, and I actually got more from his metaphysics of morals than I did from all the categorical imperative, which I still haven't memorized the different categories. Maybe Shelley, have you memorized Kant?
Here's probably the best way that this would work is that you ask me a series of yes or no questions, and I will check one of the boxes. But I will say this is that you mentioned the profane, and you read Eliade, I believe, and he talks about the sacred and the profane. There is a Temple of Abraxas album called Profanum outside the temple, which those are all tracks that I had recorded for other albums that did not make the cut, which is kind of a rare thing for me. I usually work on a track until I think it fits the album, but I had some tracks on there that were just kind of laying around that I finished up and put on that album. But yeah, because I knew they weren't fit, and there are certain things. So here's my thing, and this is, I always wind up bringing up Aleister Crowley, but the thing that turned me on to Crowley when I was a teenager was I read something of his in a book about yoga he wrote, and he said that all religions have the thing in common where they promise your eternal reward being after death. And he believed, I believe he believed that you can experience a reward of life while you're still alive. You don't have to die in order to experience joy or
You
bliss.
know why they called Crawley the Beast?
Depends on who you ask.
Well, last guy I talked to who's very into the occult and Crawley and all that, it was because Crawley would fuck anything and everything. And
yeah. So yeah, if you ask me a series of yes or no questions, I could probably have a conversation regarding Hegelian metaphysics better. But
let's not even get into Hegel and the world spirit. Shelley might like some aspects of the world spirit, and Shelley, jump in. It's your turn.
I like Hegel as far as he influenced Marx, but we won't go into that one for now. I think the idea of fucking everything and anything is could be translated as the earthly reward, or the heavenly reward found in the profane, because if you because that is like a version of just doing away with any kind of bodily discipline that is imposed on you by religious thought, and just saying, well, actually, why not have your reward now? Yeah, I won't go into the categorical imperative because Kant's boring as fuck. And yeah, he is a grueling read. He's obsessed with duty for its own sake. And yeah, generally a philosopher that I have a complex and not pleasant relationship with. But yeah, to go back to music, sorry to sort of bring it back down to earth a little bit, but in your discussion around the fact that you don't really listen to much music, it is interesting that, because I wouldn't say it's borne out in your music so much, but a lot of bands that I listen to, current bands putting stuff out, they tend to be too aware of what's going on or too aware of their history, and the albums end up being just a series of like musical reference points or like a collection of their influences. Whereas with something like Temple of Abraxas, and there are a few other artists like this, it's not like it's still very much within the black metal like canon. It still has all of those recognizable features, but it is also original in the sense that it doesn't feel obviously influenced by particular artists or a particular group of artists. Like, it's still very much its own thing. And I think there is probably more to be said about artists listening to too much music, and maybe they should spend less time doing that and spend more time in isolation, just honing their craft a bit more. Sorry, I just had that thought when we were talking earlier on.
No, I couldn't agree more. I mean, I'm not a fanboy. You know, I'm not a fanboy. I don't collect stuff. I guess I do collect stuff. I collect books and fucking synthesizers apparently and oddball shit, but I don't collect music. I'm not a consumer of it. You know, I like it. I like to turn up music. I like it loud. I like it quiet. But at the end of the day, I'd rather have I mean, I've been listening to music my whole life, and you can hear influences of certain things, but I'm not going to keep up with whatever trends are. I mean, fuck that. That's like the worst thing I could do for my own creativity is give a fuck about what somebody else is doing.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think as an observer myself, like, I try and spot trends when I see them, whether good or bad. But as a musician, it is the last thing you want to do. You want to make sure that you are striking out on your own path. Otherwise, you will just be, you know, another band that's just like reiterating the same thing that other people are doing.
Oh, I like to use the example of AC/DC. You know, I like AC/DC. I like them quite a bit, probably more than the average person. I prefer Bon Scott over Brian Johnson. But if, you know, they've been making the same album for 30 or 40, 50 years. And it's like, if they ever did a disco album or an electronica album, just because it was popular, no one would care. They'd be like, what the fuck's wrong with you guys? Maybe they have, I don't know. Maybe they did, but they did and just refused to release it. No one would release it. The labels told them to fuck off. Find another, you know, highway to hell. But
I always use Motorhead as another example of that as well. I know obviously Lemmy's not with us anymore, but yeah, Motorhead used to be a good example of a band that just kept on doing their thing all through the 70s, 80s, and 90s, regardless of what was going on.
Yeah, I never got to see Motorhead, but a friend of mine, Ed, who I did the first Transylvanian funeral, he saw Motorhead and he was like, it was so fucking loud. He said it was so awesome because all they did, he said they came out, Lemmy said, we're Motorhead, we're going to kick your ass. And that was the only words he said other than singing, and they left the stage. And it was just mind blowing. They're not going to switch it up. They're not going to, you know, why? If it works and, you know, they would take Chuck Berry songs and just rip it up. So why change what you're doing? I change what I'm doing to a certain point because I don't want to do the same thing over and over and over. But it's like, I feel an urge to branch out with my creativity. If AC/DC does not, then they should just keep doing what they're doing. They want to go on tour, they've got to make the same album again, I guess. So
yeah, there's a difference between changing on your own terms or changing on someone else's. If you need to, you know, change and refresh what you're doing, but you're doing it because you're interested in doing it and because you want to, rather than from pressure from outside.
So if you listen to Temple of Abraxas and you listen to the album Aeon of Apophis, and then you listen to Temples Forlorn, and then you listen to Night of Power, those albums sound all completely different. And I did that intentionally. The drums on Temples Forlorn was a Korg M1 synthesizer. It wasn't drum software. It wasn't a live drummer. It was a 61 key keyboard that came out in 1993, I think, or 91. I don't remember, but it's one of the most commonly heard drum sounds on the planet. And Aeon of Apophis was a different synthesizer. It was an analog synthesizer. And then Night of Power, I recorded entirely on a 4-track. And it had a built-in guitar amp modeler, and I used that. I just recorded it in like a day. I wanted a really rough around the edges, unproduced sound. And somebody heard it. And he's like, hey, I want to release this. I was like, really? You want to release the worst sounding album I've done? I labor over all these plugins and tube equipment and microphone preamps and outboard gear, and I crap something out on a weekend on a 4-track, and that's what you want to release. I said, how about I write you a proper album and you do a full album release? And he said, okay. And that was the album that became 1931, which was my last release, I believe.
Yeah, and again, 1931 is a very, very different sound to Temples Forlorn. I like them both, but again, for very different reasons. But yeah, Temple Forlorn has a completely like unique atmosphere and vibe to it, whereas the follow-up has it's more like direct down the barrel, but it has really memorable riffs and stuff. But yeah, it's just refreshing the sound, just taking it in a different direction.
Yeah, I get bored easily. I get bored with just about whatever. So I try to inject change in my creative process. And like I've said before, I'm interested in being creative. I'm not interested in, if it was making me $1 million a year, then I might try and follow some sort of predictable pattern and whatever. But I'm just kind of doing it for my own thing. And if somebody likes it, release it. If you don't. So, yeah.
That's interesting. I'm talking about change and wanting to be creative. You wrote a book. It's about dwarves and overcoming challenges, a personal journey of a dwarf. So what got you into writing a fantasy novel?
I've always enjoyed fantasy fiction, and I've liked fantasy since I was a kid, and role-playing games. And I wanted to write a book, and I did. So I was playing Dungeons and Dragons, and I had a character named Hogan Hammerheart for years. That was always my go-to name if I played a dwarf. And the name Hogan was from The Wrestler, because I liked wrestling as a kid, and I like it as an adult. And the name Hammerheart, the Bathory album, and then there was a label. I think there still is a label called Hammerheart, but it's just a cool name. I thought it was a great name for a dwarf, and I wanted to write a book. And I finally got to the point. I've wrote short fiction off and on through my life, and I've wrote short fiction I think is a lot better than the Hammerheart novel. But I wanted to write a book about grief and the hero's journey, the Campbellian idea of the hero's journey, or the religious myth of you're born a nobody and you go away for an absence and you come back as somebody, or you come back with, the word of God or some spiritual experience that you now are a leader of your people or whatever. So I wanted to write that. I wanted to create my own myth, and I used dwarves and dragons, I guess there's not really any dragons, but there's orcs and dwarves and magic and evil and good. And I wrote it, and it kind of took off on its own. My creativity just kind of fleshed it out. I don't write outlines. I just sit down and write. But I kind of hit a stumbling block. It got so far away from what I originally thought how it was going to end the characters kind of came to life on their own, and I didn't know how to finish it. And I moved across the country, and I moved to Indiana because I could buy a big house there. Thought it was a good idea. And I moved back there where my mom and stepdad were. And then like a month later, my stepdad died. And it was really devastating to everybody in the family. And finishing the book, since it was about grief anyway, kind of helped me along the grieving process because it was ultimately about grief. And that was it. And then I got the fuck out of Indiana because, you know, I like sunny, hot, humid weather more, and ocean. So the book was, I definitely did not end it as well as I started it. It's pretty rough around the edges. It would probably be better if it was a fairy tale and was a lot less wordy and had less characters, but there's definitely 5 stages of grief that the protagonist experiences. And there's also the hero's journey. I needed to work it out on my own so I could, you know, help myself understand it. So I don't know. I don't know if it was like therapy for me or it was just part of it. I'm sure it was in some regard.
Is it like an autobiography but through a dwarf in Fantasyland?
Is it my autobiography?
Yeah, I mean, not the nitty gritty details of your life, but kind of like a higher echelon of the essence of what Luke is, and going through hurdles and challenges and overcoming them. Is it kind of on par with that? Is it more personal in that regard?
I don't really think that it is. It's not like a direct translation of my life. There are some similarities. I guess that if, you know, most people who want to instruct you how to write, they'll tell you to write what you know. So there are parallels between me and Mr. Hammerheart, but there's not direct parallels. You know, I came from a small town in Indiana. I went to college. I moved away. I consider myself to be somewhat successful in life. And a lot of the people I grew up with, my friends and family, would also consider me to be successful. A lot of the people that I grew up with and associated with, you know, if they went anywhere in life, it was to jail or to rehab or to prison or to an early grave. I lost my best childhood friend the day before my birthday this year in March. He was 40 years old and died because he lived a very hard lifestyle. And it's so, you know, I quit drinking in 2006. I quit doing drugs. I was a convicted felon because of DUIs. I was fucking my life up and I got away from all that. So I transcended certain things, but I had to make sacrifices. And so there was some loss. I had to move away from my mom and dad and whatever. I had to move away from my friends. I had to move away from unhealthy influences. I had to move away from good influences. And I've always had a little bit of survivor's guilt because I got my shit together and other people haven't. I've tried to help people, but I can't bottle it up. I can't channel lightning. You know what I'm saying? So
Does a dwarf try to help other people?
oh yeah, he's a cleric. He's a healer, basically. He's a part of an army where the dwarven citadel or whatever, it's very vague. It's just all like generic fantasy, but there's a dwarven citadel and they're being beset on all sides by orc tribes and clans and armies and shit. And they're losing the battle and they're overwhelmed. And that's how the book starts, is, you know, them just being overran with wounded soldiers and he's trying to heal them and shit like that. And he's not really that good at it anymore, because when I played D&D, my dwarf, every time he tried to do something, I'd roll the dice and I'd fuck it up, and he just could not heal people. He'd fall off cliffs and do dumb shit, and he just wasn't very good at what he was doing. I thought, well, he's not in his prime. Dwarves live to be 400 years old or whatever. So he's older. His hands shake. His body doesn't feel as good, you know? He's tired. He forgot how to do the incantation. So, but he tries to help people, and yeah, that's the story. You know, it's I would recommend you read it, but you know, have a few drinks while you're doing it.
Yeah, I'm not much for fiction and fantasy. I was when I was a kid, though. I did read quite a few books when I was little about different fantasy genres, and I actually played Magic the Gathering back then, and I read all the Magic the Gathering books, and I really like Squee, the little goblin that never dies, and all that. But yeah, very cool. Like, not many people actually sit down and write a book and translate personal experiences into fantasy aspects. So it's really cool. I actually kind of draw a little parallel to Varg, writing a board, created a board game, My Farag or whatever it's called. With what you kind of do, I mean, you're both solo musicians making black metal. You both have delved into ambient music, and you both have a penchant for fantasy and dungeons and stuff. So I think it's pretty cool.
Yeah, I did some role-playing games too under the name Chaotic Evil Games. They're pretty simple, just like dungeon delves based on Dungeons and Dragon rules, because there's a free license to use the rules that's published for D&D. So it's on drivethrough.com, drivethroughrpg.com. You can, that's another place you can buy the Hammerheart novel, and then you can buy some adventures. I did one called Basilisk Tomb because I got obsessed with the idea of this huge reptilian monster that can turn you to stone. And I made music to go with it. And yeah, there may or may not be a fight with a basilisk in the Hammerheart novel. So that's kind of the thing, is that you have to go back and you have to slay the demon, and you have to slay the inner demon, and in that story it takes the form of a basilisk. So
one last question. I mean, Shelly, you're welcome to ask more about the music and all that. But Luke, you had mentioned, previously about your Native American heritage and that being quite an influence. How do you view that today?
I don't really think a lot about it. I mean, I think we talked about this the last time. I'm not even sure what my Native American heritage is. So it's kind of awkward for me to even talk about it, because I don't think it's really that big of an influence, at least not now. I mean, I think there's, from what I know about Native American history and whatever, it's just that, there were people that were unburdened by the ideas of capitalism and the idea of profit. You know what I'm saying? So it's almost like a utopia that was wiped out. So I don't really long for it, because I feel like those ideas of a utopian existence are kind of dead and gone. I'm fully aware that I'm living in Karl Marx's world, and that my labor will be sold at a profit if I'm not careful. So
yeah.
Yeah.
Shelly, go ahead. Final question.
I don't think I have a final question, other than just to say that it's been a pleasure to chat to you about like the broader context of the music, because I discovered your music online probably back in 2010 when The Outsider came out, and it was just this mysterious black metal entity from the US, and it's just quite surreal to now all these years later be chatting to you and just delving into some of the details behind the project. So it's been fascinating for me.
Yeah, thanks for chatting with me, and I'm glad you enjoy the music. Hopefully so let me ask you guys a question. What's the worst album I've done? Because I hear The Outsider and I hear Temples Forlorn, but is there something I've done that just totally sucks, that's just like, man, I don't ever want to hear that again? Is there some?
Yes, certainly.
Well, there's no hesitation from you. Okay.
No, the first A Transylvanian Funeral, I don't think you guys had an idea of what you're doing yet, but it came together with The Outsider, certainly, and Gorgo's Goetia. It was very cool too. And we actually released All for Naught and Gorgo's Goetia at the same time. And that was really cool to see both the feedback that we got at the same point in time and comparing reviews and all that. But yeah, the first A Transylvanian Funeral album I did not get into. So, but you redeemed yourself. You know, The Outsider's phenomenal. So
I thought that was the one that got everybody into it in Texas, because when I was shipping that, somebody in Texas bought 10 copies from me and I mailed them. I think they went to Shirts, Texas. And I just assumed
it was Brian Kelly. That was Brian Kelly. His parents live in Shirts. It was either Kelly or the Gastelum brothers, because they're living in Shirts too.
Yeah, I thought everybody lived in Shirts, and I was like, okay, well, I thought it was Alejandro, but I don't know. I don't know. Your mind plays tricks on you. I forget things. So maybe it was because The Outsider was, I think I released that after I moved to Arizona, and the self-titled, I was still shipping from Indiana. I hadn't left Indiana yet. So yeah.
I might disagree with Jason on the self-titled. I mean, it's sloppy and like rough around the edges, but it also has one of my favorite tracks on there, Flesh and Dust, which just has one of the most catchy black metal riffs I think I've ever heard. I remember listening to it. I just couldn't get it out of my head for weeks afterwards. So, but yeah.
I think my least favorite is Gorgos Goetia.
Yeah, I might agree with you there. I mean, again, none of your albums are like, I've not listened to them and thought, wow, that's bad. I've enjoyed them all. But yeah, I'd say that's one of the ones that didn't stick with me. I probably should revisit it actually, because I've listened to it the least, but maybe for that reason.
You know why I don't like that one and why you don't either is because I actually played drums on it. I went on Craigslist and I bought a drum set for $100 and set it up in my garage and set up my mics and beat the shit out of them for a month. And I made that album. So that's me playing drums on Gorgos Goetia. There's no drum machines or anything. So that really didn't help, but it's yeah, that one I don't know, and that was the one I put all the money into as well. So, but it's fine either way. I'm glad there's things I've done that is not, like I said earlier, it's not 100%. It's not for everybody. So someone out there probably thinks the complete opposite. So
yeah. I'm gonna give it a listen now that we've talked about it, because it's been a while since I've revisited it. So I'll let you know my thoughts.
All right. That sounds good.
Excellent. Anything else you want to bring up before we end today's episode?
No, just check out Project Warlock 2. There's play videos on YouTube. The game is in early access. That is my most current music. It's my most abstract and it's my most abstract release yet. It's not always black metal, but it's got some cool stuff. So look for that game. And yeah, always keep an eye on my Bandcamp page, because that's where the next album will be.
Yeah, let's talk about that a little bit later. But excellent. I do want to say one last thing before we wrap up today. Happy Father's Day.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, my daughter turns 18 months in so today's Father's Day. My 10-year wedding anniversary is the 21st on the solstice, and then my daughter's 18-month birthday is the 22nd. So I'm gonna
times.
Yeah, I'm excited for this week. It's been nice so far. Thanks for having me on the show, and thanks again.
Yes, sir. And thank you both. So that was Luke from A Transylvania Funeral, Temple of Abraxas, Forbidden Records, Forbidden Magazine, Forbidden Radio, the author of Hammerheart about the dwarf, former real estate agent, jack of all trades and master of some of them. And I want to thank Shelly, co-host today. You're still in the league of extraordinary gentlemen. So thank you both.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, guys.